It's very, very challenging for most of us to find the balance of how to set a boundary and to do it in a compassionate way. Some of us are people pleasers, and so we're good with compassion, we're good with being kind and considerate, but we really struggle to set a boundary because we don't want to hurt the other person. We don't want to be seen as anything less than loving, kind, caring, etc. Others of us are like, no, this is who I am. It's the way it is. Like it or leave it. Take it or leave it. My way or the highway. And there's kind of that attitude. And there's a certain strength to that. But of course, it's often lacking in compassion. Also, what happens is when people set boundaries without compassion, it creates resentment. It's pretty easy for the other person to turn you into an enemy image. The very thing that we just talked about not doing. Well, when we are not compassionate in setting our boundaries, people can feel hurt and project all sorts of judgments onto us. So we want to find that balance of how to set boundaries and to be compassionate, and ideally for our boundaries to be understood. In order to set a boundary in a compassionate way, I like to call it, you're going to create a boundary sandwich. You're going to lead with authentic reassurance that you care. This is so important. Lead with authentic reassurance that you care. This serves two purposes. For those of us that are afraid to set a boundary because we're afraid that the other person is going to think we don't care about them, it resolves that. And for the other person who's going to receive the boundary or hear the no, it lets them know, hey, I do care about you. Because sometimes when we set a boundary or we say no, the other person turns it into a lack of care. So we all want to be cared for in any significant, important relationship we have. Even between employer and employee, we want to be cared for. We want to know that there is some level of care. So based on the culture of the relationship, lead with authentic reassurance that you care. Then as you set the boundary, you explain why you're setting the boundary. Which of your needs are being met by the boundary, or which of your needs would not be met if you didn't have this boundary. So you're really helping people to understand this. The example I think I'll use is when somebody one person asks another to go out on a date or to go on an experience, and the person being asked has a no. The person being asked, lead with authentic reassurance that you care. Thank you for asking. Thank you for thinking of me. I do like you, whatever the real truth is. I really enjoy our friendship, or you're important to me as a workmate, or whatever it might be. Then you set the boundary. Thank you, but I'm not available. Whatever it might be. Maybe you're not available that night for that event. Maybe you're not available to move into that direction of relationship. You explain, I'm not available. This is why I'm not available. Now remember I said it's a boundary sandwich. We lead with authentic reassurance that we care. We set the boundary and we explain why. And then the other part of the sandwich, the other part of the bread, if you will, is we acknowledge their feelings once they hear the boundary. Maybe they're disappointed. Maybe they're sad. Maybe even they're angry. We acknowledge any feelings, and they probably are going to be uncomfortable feelings as a result of our setting the boundary. We acknowledge the feelings, and ideally, we even empathize with those feelings. Oh, you're feeling really disappointed. Wow, I can see that you're really angry. Tell me more. Which of your needs are not being met by my setting this boundary? Now, it doesn't mean we change the boundary. Doesn't mean we change our answer because we don't want to hurt their feelings, but we acknowledge their feelings. We acknowledge their discomfort, which actually creates a beautiful quality of connection. When we deny another person's feelings, that creates resentment and disconnect. When we acknowledge and ideally empathize with another person's feelings, even if they're uncomfortable feelings, and even if they're uncomfortable feelings that are a reaction or a response to a choice we've made, that still is a beautiful act of compassion, a beautiful act of care, sometimes even an act of love. So that's how we set boundaries with compassion. Now we get into a difficult question that comes up often. What happens when people don't honor the boundary? How do you deal with people who don't honor the boundary? That is so hard. It's a very difficult situation. Ultimately, when someone consistently does not accept or acknowledge, or if they don't agree to the boundary, then we have a hard choice to make. How important is this relationship? If they're not agreeing to the boundary, can I live with that? I find that often people stay in friendships based on either loyalty to what the friendship once was or potential of what people want the friendship to be. But it's important for us to look in present time, what am I getting out of this friendship? What are the benefits? And what are the challenges? What are the hard things? What are the detriments? And to really weigh that within ourselves and to look at that, especially when our boundaries are consistently crossed. We have to look at, can I, within my own integrity, stay in this relationship and accept this person's behavior? Are the benefits of the relationship balancing out that challenge? Now, sometimes you might go, yeah, I'm just being nitpicky. I can live with it. It's not that bad. But other times, there's the painful realization of, I'm not enjoying this friendship. I'm not enjoying this relationship because they're not honoring my boundary. Probably the most common example where it gets really difficult is around a person's use of alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs, because that triggers pretty big things for us. And I think almost all of us have been in a situation where there might be someone in our life that we like or we care about or we want to have a relationship with, but they have a relationship to smoking or drugs or alcohol that impacts their behavior and perhaps impacts how they are when they're with us. And so in those cases, then we have to have the very difficult conversation of, I really like who you are when you haven't had too much to drink. But when you've had a certain amount to drink, or in some cases when you're drinking at all, it's uncomfortable for me to be around you. But again, we can try the boundary sandwich. I genuinely care about you. I really enjoy who you are and the quality of our friendship, especially when you're sober. And it's my trigger, but I experience when you are under the influence, or when I perceive you're under the influence, there's a change in the behavior and it impacts me in such a way that I'm no longer enjoying our time together. Now that's on me. I'm not making you wrong. You have every right to do whatever you want, but I need to set a boundary here because I'm learning how to take better care of myself. Those, by the way, are really wonderful words to memorize. I'm learning how to take better care of myself. Because often that is the case. We're learning how to take better care of ourselves by setting boundaries. Because when we set a clear boundary, then we know the parameters. In most games, you need to know what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, right? Boundaries help us define and understand the playing field. And by understanding the playing field, we can play fair. And we have an agreement that allows us to have a mutually agreed upon, mutually rewarding relationship. So boundaries create a healthy, agreed upon playing field, which is good for a healthy relationship. So it's important to look at it that way.